What's going on, Lions fans? Welcome to the Pride of Detroit YouTube channel. My name is Miko, joined once again by my guy Morgan Cannon, and this is your go-to place for all things Lions related. That includes news, updates, analysis, and so much more. Today, we are jumping back into our All-22 film breakdown series where we take a look at the Lions' most recent draft class and look at what they were doing in college and basically trying to gauge and understand what the Lions saw and why they prioritize targeting these players and what they could potentially bring to this roster once we start to get into training camp, OTAs, and obviously the preseason and regular season as well, Morgan. And at this point in time, we're getting into day 3. So far, we've already talked about Tyleik Williams on this channel. We've talked about Tate Ratledge, and our most recent video that we did, we looked at Isaac Teslaw, the wide receiver out of Arkansas. And all of those have been, like, again, really eye-opening in terms of what these players bring to this roster. But I think the guy that we're going to talk about today, Morgan, is probably the most interesting of them all in terms of where the Lions were able to get him. And then what we're talking about is offensive lineman Miles Frazier out of LSU. Miles Frazier, Morgan, was someone that I think a lot of draft analysts thought would go much higher than the 5th round, but the Lions might have got themselves a pretty good steal here.
I mean, we're certainly hoping so, right? Like, I really like Miles Frazier. Battle-tested LSU guy, started everywhere: right tackle, right guard, left guard, left tackle, so everywhere but center. And yeah, like he's pro ready. I think there's some deficiencies in his game that maybe caused him to slide. I don't know, but a lot of people still had them. Like, to your point, Miko, had him like really highly rated, like on their draft boards, like for the interior offensive lineman. And like we talked about, he can play, like he can kick out a tackle in a pinch, in my opinion. But I think this is going to be a good one, because if he can start getting better at a few things, you know what I mean? Like, correct some of those deficiencies, he can be really good depth right away for this offensive line. And we as Lions fans, especially in 2024, we know how depth is pretty important, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I love what you said about, again, him being what at least seems to be fairly pro ready. And today we're going to be looking at the LSU game versus Ole Miss last year. And I feel like this is probably like the 3rd time that we've looked at Ole Miss in regards to like the game film that we've looked at. And I think it's a good reminder for people, if you're wondering, if you've watched all the other ones and you keep wondering, why are we focusing on Ole Miss? Ole Miss had a very, very talented defensive line last year. And obviously with the Lions drafting both Tate Ratledge and Miles Frazier, both of those teams playing against Ole Miss, it's a really good measuring stick on, like, hey, how did they handle, one of the better defensive lines, especially one of the better defensive tackle prospects that actually went fairly high in this draft in Walter Nolan. So Morgan, that's something that we're also going to get a chance to look at in terms of how did Miles Frazier fare against one of the higher drafted defensive tackles in this draft class.
Yeah, and you pointed it out to me. I honestly forgot. I watched this tape, just was really focusing on Frazier and what he was doing. But yeah, I liked Walter Nolan coming out, man. A lot of people did. Where did he end up going again? Did you just say?
I believe he went like top 15. I can't remember exactly where he went off the top of my head, but I do believe it was like top 15.
Let us know in the comments,
draft
chat.
Class. Yeah, please do. But yeah, Morgan, let's go ahead and jump into the tape. And I think, speaking of Walter Nolan, this first play that we're going to get into is a really good example of what you can expect from Miles Frazier in terms of what he brings as a pass blocker and really just as a big body on the interior of the offensive line.
Yeah, and he's a really good athlete, and it shows on tape, right? So, like, maybe I don't know his RAS off the top of my head, but he, like, pops on tape in terms of his athleticism. So here, just really good lateral agility out of his stance allows him to wash, is it Walter Nolan, down the line of scrimmage. So knowing where the ball's going, I'll go ahead and ride you out of here. So you see that quite a bit. He's quick out of his stance. He's good with his footwork. There's not a lot of wasted movement. And that's what you want, especially from someone who's, he's started a lot. The experience is there from like a college standpoint, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I love how you said, like, he's pretty, like, athletic in terms of, like, it really pops off the screen. I had to watch so many of his plays back like 3 or 4 times, because I would look down for a second and pop my head back up, and like the play would be over. And it's just like he's moving that quickly. And it was something else that, like, obviously we've looked at Tate Ratledge. And it was one of the first differences that I noticed fairly early in the tape, was just like, oh, they move differently in terms of athletically. And especially, like you said, laterally is where I could really notice the difference.
Yeah, like I don't know his background off the top of my head, but like I could see Miles Frazier maybe being a hooper back in the day. Maybe someone will know watching this video, but like he's good at like sliding his feet, covering space. This is another good one, man. So you're gonna watch basically Ole Miss is gonna run a game where the two tackles are gonna loop. One's gonna crash, one's gonna loop. So the three technique, 51 opposite of Frazier, is gonna loop off of the crashing defensive tackle. Just he passes this off really well, Miko.
Yeah, this is where, like, again, understanding, responsibilities, understanding the game in itself, and just having really good like security and awareness in what your responsibility is, not getting too overwhelmed by like, oh, this guy that I was supposed to block is no longer in front of me. Like, this is something that popped up in his tape time and time again, Morgan, where it's just like, if whether he had someone that he was supposed to fire off on, or if he had to wait for a guy, whether it's a late blitzer or something like that, he always just seemed so comfortable in his space, and never got like, again, a little too high or a little overwhelmed with operating in space, which, if I remember correctly, that was one thing that I kind of like had like a small little knock on Tate Ratledge on, is that like when Tate had to be in space, he sometimes would look a little confused. You look at Miles Frazier here, and he's just so under control and understanding what he's supposed to be doing.
Yeah, and it's a good job. He chips. He gets a good chip on Walter Nolan, makes it easier for his center, and then just wastes no time working back to his right, picks up 51. And they kept him pretty clean from what I saw. Whoever the LSU quarterback is, forgive me, LSU fans, if you're watching this. This is another one. So Ole Miss here comes out with a 4-man front pre-snap, but they end up only rushing 3. So 4 over there on the right side of your screen is going to end up dropping. And another really good example, like you talked about, Miko, keeping his head on a swivel, looking for work, and ends up being a pretty crucial block because the right tackle, not the best rep from our boy 50 there, man. That was pretty rough.
No, and I did love this play for that exact reason, right? Like, and that's something that you have to be able to do in the NFL, is that like, listen, you can't just be, so sold out on what you're supposed to be blocking or what space you're supposed to be occupying. Like, you also have to help the guy next to you. And so for Miles Frazier to have this level of awareness, like, oh, you got beat, let me go ahead and chip here a little bit and give our quarterback a little bit more time. It's a really good rep.
Yeah, and just a tough rep for 50. I want to clarify. He looked pretty good from what I saw from the most part, but he just kind of got his hands beat here. Good throw from the quarterback, though. This is a nice layered throw if we're just packing. We don't talk quarterback speak a lot here in the offseason,
Yeah.
but quarterback stuff, excuse me. But this is a nice layered throw from 13, and he's able to do that because he's got a nice clean pocket, relatively clean pocket. He had a little heat coming there off the left tackle, but yeah, good overall play and another good example of Frazier knowing where he's supposed to be.
And that's something that as a Lions fan should like at least excite you about the potential of, like you were talking about earlier, Morgan, that potential offensive line depth. Because if you start to have injuries on the interior of your offensive line, the last thing you want to do is have somebody come in that can't have that lacks that awareness, right? Like, keeping Jared Goff upright is a very, very vital part of this offense. And so, like I said, there's a number of times throughout this game of LSU versus Ole Miss where you just see him operate very, very well in space, never really getting overwhelmed, never really getting caught like in terms of just like not knowing what he's supposed to do, right? Like, he's just so confident in his pass blocking. But this next play that we're going to look at here is maybe one of the few things that if we're talking about like, why does a guy that we are talking so highly about as far as pass protection, why does he slide to the 5th round, especially someone that has good size, seems to be fairly athletic on tape, and has a great versatility along the offensive line? How does a dude like this end up in the 5th round? And I think it's little things like this, Morgan, when it comes down to his run blocking, where it's not bad. I'm not going to sit here and say that he's a bad run blocker. I will say that for me, it was very inconsistent in this game specifically. And I don't know if it's just Ole Miss. I don't know if this was something that was fairly common for him throughout the season, but you and I kind of agreed on this. He kind of lacks a little bit of oomph when it comes down to like, blocking downfield or really engaging with guys.
Yeah, and we're going to get into it. We're not, the grip strength is there. He's pretty good at anchoring, and when he's pass pro. But like Miko said, some of the power, like some of the play strength stuff. So you'll watch here. Originally, both the defensive tackles are head up with the guards, but at the last second, the one over Miles Frazier is going to take one step out instead of the 3 technique outside of Miles's right shoulder. And so they're both going to collapse, like they're going to shoot to the A gaps. And I don't know if that's by design, but yeah, he muddies things up pretty well. He gets off the ball well, and it looks to be a large human being. So I'll give Frazier a little bit of
Hmm.
credit here. But yeah, this is something that probably did cause, and it's not something that we're just zoning in on here. It pops up here and again with his tape, just having that. Whereas Ratledge, if we're talking about contrast, Ratledge wants to get you in a phone booth because that's where he's going to beat the you know what out of you. Frazier is a little bit more like he's an athlete, but maybe some of this play strength still needs to be developed because the athleticism's there. Maybe he can, he's going to be with one of the best, if not the best, offensive line coaches in football, and Hank Fraley. So there's something, there's room to improve. Like this is definitely fixable, right, Miko?
Yeah, I think that's a very good point to point out, Morgan, is that like I think any of the negatives that we point out in regards to Miles Frazier, it's not like it's absolutely busted technique. It's not like he has bad feet. It's not like he has bad hand placement. It really does just seem like maybe if you can get him into, an NFL weight program, maybe if you can teach him how to, maybe again, if there is something technique wise that maybe we can hone in on, is maybe he needs to drive from his hips a little bit more, drive his feet a little bit more. Those are things that, like you said, are very much correctable by just getting him with a really good O-line coach, getting him with some really solid veterans that can show him how to do those things consistently. Again, not that he can't do them. It's just that you would like to see it on a more consistent basis, because when you're talking about a Lions team that loves to run the football and that has two really good backs, it's not enough always to just be able to seal guys off, and it's not enough to just be good in pass pro. Like, they're going to need you to fire off the ball and create gaps so that your two great running backs can still go out there and gash the opposing defense and pick up yards.
Yep, 100%, man. Like it's still going to be a main. No matter how good the Lions get at throwing the football, they want to be able to beat people to sleep with running the football, and they do it quite a bit over the last several years. So this is one I really liked just because I'm a football dork, but this is essentially a stretch concept out of a pistol formation, right? So what we're looking at is that the three technique lined up over Frazier to begin the play, he is actually going to get blocked by 79, or he's supposed to. From there, Frazier is going to go up there and try to reach the linebacker, and the puller's kicking out, 50's kicking out, and it's supposed to create an alley. The 79, the center, doesn't really get a good block on the three technique, and it's pretty much over from there. But another good example of him being an athlete and like being able to move well in space.
Yeah, this was one of those things that made me go, like, just because of how quickly he gets out of his stance and how quickly he gets to space. Like, it's a nice little like side, like it's not even like a step. It almost looks like a little bit of a hop, and he just immediately gets out there in space, and like you said, is able to get his hands on the linebacker. Um, and you and I said this time and time again, he seems to be one of those guys with like that grip strength that you talked about earlier. If he gets his hands on you, you're going wherever he wants you to go or wherever he doesn't want you to go. It's that type of game with him.
Yeah, and that like this is maybe my favorite play of this next play that we're doing is probably my favorite play because you talked about the grip strength. This is awesome, man. So LSU's an empty here. Ole Miss is going to only end up rushing three. That stand up edge over there on the left side of your screen is going to end up falling off. And watch the hand placement from Miles Frazier. So his left hand, you're going to watch, it's going to go onto the center's like back essentially. And he's doing that because he's trying to feel where he's at, right? So he doesn't get his feet tangled up. That's what he's taught to do. And then while he's doing that, he's able to punch with that right hand. Again, he's working against Walter Nolan, ended up going however high our commenters said in the, when he got drafted. And he's able to work that left hand off of 79, gets it onto the chest plate, and he just locks him in, man. Walter Nolan tries to like shuck him, tries the hump move, nothing. And another easy, clean pocket for 13 and another strike. Did LSU win this game?
I'm gonna be honest with you. I got to the point where I was like, I pretty much know who Miles Frazier is, and I didn't even finish watching the tape.
I did too, but I don't know who won. I don't know. My tape ended. That's all it basically was for me. But yeah, I hope LSU won. They offense looked pretty good for most of the game, but
No, they did. I mean, I think they had some turnovers, a couple like really bad interceptions. The quarterback in the
yeah.
second half definitely started forcing some throws, but it's not the fault of the offensive line. To your point, Morgan, like this offensive line played really, really well. And Miles Frazier is a big, big part of that.
Yeah, it's one of my favorite reps. That was beautiful right here. So this is a pull. So they're running power, and so he's going to pull to his left, and it's a pretty good job squaring up the defender. This is just another example where he could have maybe a little bit more. Like he kind of stops driving his feet, or excuse me, chops his feet before he makes contact with the edge. So see the edge, that's their force player over there. He looks to be quite a bit smaller than Frazier, and you would just like him to not chop his feet right there and kind of try to run through a dude's face and get some
Hmm.
displacement. So that's something that I'm sure that can be cleaned up too, just with a little bit of just working on coming out of that pull with some purpose and wanting to run through somebody instead of just being content to kind of make contact and chopping our feet.
Yeah, I think like you said, this is more definitely of like a technique issue in terms of like what he's doing with his feet, but like in terms of just getting out in space and getting there, very fluid, very natural. Like it doesn't look like this is something that is something that he's not comfortable doing, and that's at least again still a positive. And like you said, it just comes down to those little things of like, hey, let's have some more bad intention when it comes down to like when if you come around this corner and you see a linebacker, you see a safety there, you should get giddy and you should want to drive this dude 10 yards back.
That's actually a great point, and it could be just as much he just needs to hang out with Christian Mahogany a lot. That he could, like have some of that,
Hmm.
have some of that dirt bag rub off on him. There's nothing wrong with a little bit of dirt bag, man. That's what if I were an offensive line recruiter in a different reality, I would almost require some dirt bag him. If you're not a, if you're not a Panay Sewell or Frank Ragnow type talent, you better be a dirt bag.
I mean, I think you also need it just for playing interior offensive line. Like you're in the thick of it, right? You're in some like, it gets
You're in the
really
trenches.
messy down in the inside. So I think that first play is a good example of like you're saying, like there's a little bit of technique issue there in terms of chopping his feet. This next one is a little bit of the same thing where he's pulling once again and just being able to line up your target and making sure that you can hit them square. Again, it's not to say that he can't do it. He still looks very comfortable pulling to that side. It's just those little details of like, hey, if you can get this type of space, like this is a home run. If you're talking about Detroit and Jahmyr Gibbs is coming up behind you, like Jahmyr needs you to make this block.
Yeah, because it could be one cut and he's gone 70 yards. So I don't know if this is just overrunning his landmark a little bit, but like he gets just a little bit too far out in front of the block, and I think this is a safety. Number 23 makes a nice play and he's able to just kind of dip under it. But yeah, it's like the opposite end of the spectrum of the play that we just talked about beforehand, like where you can, like, you got him squared up, go ahead and run through him. Like, this time you kind of need to chop your feet and like find because you're coming around the corner and you don't really necessarily have like eyesight on your assignment yet. So yeah, this is one of
Hmm.
those. He looks good running though, to your point, in space. He's moving.
Yeah, it's something that I think like will benefit him very, very well once we start getting into camp because I don't know. Like I just like the idea of having an interior offensive lineman that moves this well. That's is this athletic. Like you said, I wish I did have his RAS score because I feel like it has to be fairly high. Like he moves so well and so quickly. This is a true asset to have in terms of like again, if whether it's depth on the interior offensive line, we know how the Lions like to occasionally roll out a sixth offensive lineman and things like that. Like we got to keep in mind Miles Frazier is 6'5", so it's not like he's 6'3", 6'2". He has really good size for an interior offensive line, but he also has like prototypical size for a tackle. So like it's that level of versatility where like you can have him on your active day roster, and you really have like a really good weapon to deploy for your offensive line.
Yep. It would be a luxury to have him be able to like be really competent, and developing depth going into 2025, like in my opinion. So shoot, they'll give him an opportunity. If he's the best player, he'll end up starting. This is one where coaches just will tell you if they're going to make it easy for you, go ahead and let them. So the defensive line, if you'll see everybody with their hand in their dirt, is going to slant towards the left tackle. And with Frazier, he's just going to be like, okay, I'm going to go ahead and ride you on out of this hole. And 18's able to run off his hip. Yeah, pullers do their job. This is blocked pretty well. So good on LSU here.
Yeah, I think this is another really good one. I think watching a play like this kind of helps me understand the difference between a Tate Ratledge and a Miles Frazier. Like, I think Tate is more of a bulldozer. Like you kind of said, like he's more of a mauler, definitely wants to like really get out there and move people, bury people. I think Miles Frazier is very content with just being the great wall, like that you're just not going to be able to displace him easily. And that he can be a wall that, again, even in a play like this, I can move you to one side and just seal off this lane. So you're not getting back that way. Like you're not going to be able to just go through me and get to the running back. And I think both types of interior offensive linemen are needed on an NFL roster.
Yeah, you do. And there's different types of play styles. You know what I mean? Like like you said, he can get a little bit stronger. He can, develop that nastiness. And there's been plenty of guards and interior offensive linemen, plenty. That's a position that it happens quite often where you can find really good value in the later rounds. So I'm hopeful after watching this tape, man. I really like Miles Frazier. I'm happier. I was happy. I know you were too, Miko. We were happy with the pick when it happened. And I'm certainly happier now because I want this to be the best roster that we've seen in several, a long, long time going into the season, top to bottom. And Frazier's a big part of that.
Yeah, and I think the things that we didn't get to necessarily see in this game or in the tape that we had available to us is, like, again, that versatility that he has. Like, the Lions are already exploring that already at rookie minicamp that was this past weekend, having him play both right guard and right tackle. Like, I think they're going to give him every opportunity to see, just like with any of the offensive linemen that they've ever brought in under this regime, they're going to see how versatile you can be. And with someone like Miles Frazier, like I said, he has that prototypical size for both a guard and a tackle, where you really can have that type of flexibility for your roster when it comes down to, like, training camp battles and things like that. We've talked about already with the addition of Tate Ratledge, obviously with Christian Mahogany playing fairly well last year in a limited capacity. Those guard spots are going to be very, very competitive. If you have someone like if you have someone like Miles Frazier, who has that versatility as a tackle as well, maybe you're also just content with, like, hey, if Miles doesn't win a starting spot, we know we have really good depth at both guard and tackle, like that we can actually trot him out there and he can back up Panay, he can back up Taylor, as well as back up everybody else on the offensive line.
That's a luxury, and then you talk about some of the other guys that are still vying for starting positions, and, you go all the way down to, like, I like Muti and Coyote Awashika. Like, those guys are proven. Like, Coyote's played some big football games for the Lions over the last, 2-3 years. So yeah, man, I really am excited about Frazier and excited to see the competition here. I want to see if our prediction holds up, Mahogany at left guard and Ratledge at right guard. I think that would be a fun one rolling forward.
I think if you're looking for two people movers, I think that would probably be the most ideal tandem. Miles Frazier makes things very, very interesting, especially if he continues to pass block very well in camp. And that's the thing that, like, once we start getting to training camp and once we're able to see these guys, especially in pads, I can't wait for, like, the O-line, D-line stuff, because it's going to be so interesting to see, like, how these guys hold up against a fairly talented defensive line. You're going to have DJ Reader. You're still going to have Marcus Davenport, Levi Onwuzurike. Tyleik Williams is going to be so fun to watch against these guys. Like, it's going to be a lot of really fun battles. Hutchinson is back on the practice field and stuff like that today. So, like, it's getting closer. We're getting that much closer to real football until, like, a lot of these things actually mattering. And I'm excited. So that's pretty much going to do it for this film study, guys. That is Miles Frazier in a nutshell. Let us know in the comment section below, what do you think about him as a prospect? Where do you think he best slots in this offensive line room? All right, do you think you see him more as a starter? Is he more of a depth piece? What do you kind of see? And the next time that you guys see us, we'll be talking about probably one of the more exciting 6th-round picks that I can think the Lions have had in a while, or at least the most energetic 6th-round pick that the Lions have had in recent memory, and Ahmed Hassanin. So it's going to be really exciting to get into his tape and see what he brings to that Lions defense. But before we get to that, like I said, if you guys are looking for any more additional Lions content, you can always check out prideofdetroit.com. We have new articles going up over there all of the time with the schedule release coming up this week. You definitely want to be locked into the website, because that's where you're going to be able to find out what the actual Lions schedule is going to look like for the 2025 season. Kind of really can't wait for that day, just so I can kind of put my mind at ease and understand what the roster, what the schedule is going to look like for the season. But yeah, outside of that, guys, if you want to continue to support the Pride of Detroit YouTube channel, all you have to do is hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell. Those things help out the channel a ton, and it also makes it easier for you guys to find our content as well. But with all that said, I'm Miko. He's Morgan. Thank you guys for taking the time to watch, and we'll see you guys in the next one.